Hello, welcome. You don't even know how excited I am for this video because it took me weeks to win this, and when I did, it was just an incredible triumph. Today, I'm going to show you my successful challenge run of a very specific level in Diplomacy is Not an Option. It's one of the challenges under May Darkness Fall called Kill It Before It's Too Late, and I've been trying to beat it on ultra hardcore mode. In this level, there are a number of huge boss enemies called Nightmare Generals. You get 12 full days to prepare, and then at the end you get one big wave with all of the Nightmare Generals, all the enemies on the map, and I think 2 additional enemy waves. And with ultra hardcore as the difficulty, I'm not sure what specifically is different, but it is very hard, and I desperately wanted to get the gold medal for this challenge to prove myself as not being good at diplomacy or whatever. Also, hello to anyone new. I'm Savalian, a software and game developer, an artist, a gamer, general creative internet person. I make videos about games, game dev, creativity, whatever I feel like basically, and it's nice to meet you. For this level, you start off at Town Hall level 3, so you can build basically anything you want to build right from the start as long as you can get the resources for it. You also start with a couple of horse archers and some axemen, which are good for collecting the few resources from the map that are there. As far as I can tell, this one only has carts full of gold, and there are only a couple of them, and they usually put them right next to the Nightmare Generals. Sometimes you can sneak in and get them with the horse archers, but it's kind of risky. For this one, because each level is randomly generated based on the challenge, like parameters, I would check the seed, check what I've got, and restart if it wasn't defensible enough or if there weren't resources close enough. I don't think I went overboard with it, like really save scumming it up, but I just didn't want to spend an hour building up defenses in an area that I knew I couldn't win with. And this map that I got was pretty good. We have rock walls on most sides of the base, which means that we can get some free defense. We just have to defend between them, which is always a good thing. I often started with a top tier lumber mill because everything else that you can build sort of builds on top of lumber. There's kind of a dearth of workers at the beginning, so you have to really choose what you're going to prioritize for those first 2 days. You can build lower level resource buildings and get more of them because they use fewer people, but if you look at the descriptions for all of them, the higher tier you go, the more efficient the workers are. So it's really, in my opinion, a better idea to build the top tier ones first. They also increase the amount of resources in like an iron or stone mine, which is important because it means you get more throughout the course of the game. I try to take my few fighting units out strategically, trying to kite them and make sure that the archers don't get killed so I can clear out a couple of enemy nests. I don't go too crazy clearing out enemies before that final wave, just the ones that are close or that are blocking resources that I want to use. I decided to also grab an iron mine. Iron becomes very important later because you can use it to reinforce your walls with research, but you need a lot of it. It costs 60 iron, and without reinforcing the walls, the Nightmare Generals can just slice through them like butter, even at level 3. So it's really important to get that reinforcement. I forget what percentage it increases them by. I want to say it's like 30%. Days 1 and 2 are really about trying to find the most defensible shape for your base to have, and because there's no enemy waves until day 12, you really don't need to worry about defending your resource nodes at all. By the time enemies move in to attack them, the game's basically over, like it's the end game. Sometimes a few more resources trickling in can help train up new units, but most of the time when that final wave hits, you can just scrap all of your mines and lumber mills because you're not going to need them. I also make heavy use of the little watchtowers to scope things out, get an idea of where the enemies are, find the gold carts, and figure out where lumber is most concentrated. Making sure your little guys don't have to walk 1,000 miles to collect resources means you get more of them faster. I also completed this challenge before the big spring update that happened a week or two ago, so I don't have access to some of the traps and upgrades that they added in that update. It's a pretty good update. I'm really happy with it. This is just a good game overall, and I'm always excited to see the new stuff that they're adding. I try to start building housing as early as possible so I can get more workers and use those workers to get more resources. In some cases, if I'm strapped for iron, I will just use a level 2 house instead of level 3. I don't always do top tier on the housing because getting iron is super important. Not only for the reinforced walls, but you use them to train a lot of the higher level units. There's a lot of things you use iron for. In some of my runs, I experimented with building a university because it gives you a research speed boost, but in the end, it hasn't been worth it. It costs a huge amount to build, 5 workers to staff it, and there are just other things that are more important. So it was kind of nice to have, but I thought initially I'd be able to make use of the big infinite resource nodes, and then I realized you need a ton of resources just to unlock them, so it ended up not being worth it for this challenge. At about day 3, I found out I had to really start prioritizing food. What you don't want to happen is to get into a starvation loop where people die of hunger and then you don't have enough people to collect food, so the next day more people die of hunger, and it just continues on like that. I fell into this trap a few times. A level 2 farm is the best option, but if you need to use the other food buildings, berries are much faster than fishing as long as you have berries nearby. The fishing huts are just really slow and they do run out of fish, which I think is a little bit weird. I feel like we would sort of manage that as a community and not make the fish extinct, but what do I know? But basically, I try to prioritize berry bushes. If there's literally no berry bushes anywhere, I'll set up a couple of fishing huts, but try to get that farm built as soon as possible. And when you have over 100 citizens, a farm on its own is not really enough. You do need more food. You can manage this by trading for food, or you can just build, both things, farm and berry huts or whatever. But it's just important to manage the food. And remembering that walking time is really critical for gathering resources, it's a good idea to put storage near the mines and the lumber mills so they don't have to walk all the way back to City Hall. It also just gives you more storage space, which is nice. And also each additional level of mine building increases the total resources of the mine. So you really want to build like a tier 3 stone mine as early as you can, because it'll make the stone last the longest. And I have exhausted 1 or 2 stone mines throughout the 12 days, so it is something to worry about. And I would also recommend researching the research that makes your workers walk faster early. Like I said, if we can front load these resources, it makes the end game just a much easier. One building I didn't even know about until maybe my 20th attempt at this challenge was the workshop. It increases the processing speed of all work buildings in its radius. This includes lumber mills, mines, the farm. All of these things can be sped up a little bit. So I like to put it as centrally as possible. If I can hit everything, that's great. If I can't cover everything, I'll usually prioritize the mines, because the stone and the iron are what's going to make the end level defenses easier to build. As soon as I can, I like to build a tavern just to avoid that starvation loop I mentioned. And the earlier we can do this, the more food we can stock up. It's also good to build another granary, a high-level granary, so you can hold more food. You can build up a little bit of a buffer, and then if you can get enough food saved up early, you may not even need to really build that many food buildings, and you can use those workers for something else instead. I also use the market strategically on this challenge. I think you kind of need the market. I don't know if you can get away with just not building one because you do need a good amount of gold, but it depends on the map you're dealt when you start your game. If you get a map with a ton of stone mines, but less iron or wood, it can be nice to trade that stone for, you know, what you need, iron or gold maybe. Sometimes, like on this map, there's a pretty good supply of wood available, so you can use that to trade the wood for more iron or more gold. You do need gold to build the second level Engineers Guild and also to build trebuchets, which are really important for dealing damage. The Nightmare Generals are super beefy, but also the enemy waves that they come with are huge. So getting a big rock dropped in the middle of there helps manage all of the enemies a little bit. Another little trap I kept getting myself into was having too many unemployed workers. I did it in this run a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. It's important to increase population, but you want to make sure you are actually using them to produce things or to fight. This attempt was a little unusual because I didn't even build a barracks until day 6. I did very little fighting, and I really focused heavily on base building and gathering resources, which I don't know, maybe that was the winning strategy. Maybe that's what got me to win this one when I failed so many other ones. But it is still important that you don't have all of these workers you're feeding that aren't helping you build up your little community here. The challenge text does say you should try to kill the Nightmare Generals before the final wave comes in because they are very tough and the defenses do not do very much to stop them. But it just takes time to get the attack power to handle something like that. I find that a combination of crossbows and trebuchets is best for Nightmare Generals. You can get them down with crossbows if you have enough of them and they have that speed boost research. And you need enough stone wall, enough of the top level stone wall that you can burn them down before they cut through and just start shredding your like civilian buildings. At this point, I'm still really focusing on gathering as many resources as I can. I did get the reinforced stone walls researched, so that's done. There's another tier after that, which increases the civilian building durability. I usually grab that when I can, but honestly, once they're through the outer walls, if they get to the town hall, they're probably bringing it down even if you have it reinforced, especially if it's a big enemy wave with all those little guys. They can really do a lot of damage. And one thing that kept happening to me that I made sure to watch out for is that sometimes the Nightmare Generals will just wander a little too close to your workers. They get aggroed, they come on in and they start the fight early. It sucks and usually means the run is over. Once in a while, if I had enough crossbows trained, I could sort of lead him to a group of houses or something and burn him down while he chops all the houses down. But it was kind of 50-50. Usually I didn't have enough firepower to take him down and just had to start over. But to avoid this, you'll want to have a look at where they are and make sure your zones for your little resource buildings, like your lumber mill and your berry pickers, don't get too close to where the Nightmare General is at because they do wander around a little bit. And they have a vision range of, I think, 8 squares, so it's pretty big. They can see you from pretty far away, and then they will attack, and if they're close enough to your town, when they're done killing your poor lumberjack or whatever, they'll just keep on going and attack your whole town. Around day 8 is where I start to seriously strategize for taking down my first Nightmare General. I really tried to get to them earlier, but it just takes so long to get this like foundation set up. And getting a choke point where I can lead them, build a few decoy walls to let them wail on while I crossbow them to death is the basic strategy that I used. It was pretty effective. And if you wall up the space completely, it's kind of hard for crossbows to hit enemies. So usually what I do is I just dot a bunch of stone walls in between and leave some gaps. The new taller defense towers might fix this problem, but as I said, I did this run before the spring update, so I did not have those. And I'm wondering if it would be easier to do this challenge now with the new update, or if it would just be difficult in a different way. Enemies also target walls more when there's a person on them, so sometimes I would kind of send one out to be sacrificed. I would try to pull them in before the wall's destroyed, but these Nightmare Generals have a pretty big range, so it's not always, you can't always get them in quick enough. But that's one way to keep them distracted. Around day 9, I'm at almost 200 citizens with a steady stream of resources, but I haven't really started building defenses yet because these tier 3 towers are so expensive, and in some runs I tried to start with wood or the first level of stone defenses and upgrade them later, but something I ran into was the time it took to do all the additional construction just seemed to take way too long. Even with several builder buildings, I ended up with a lot of unfinished construction by that final wave, which just left me vulnerable to the attack. And on day 9, I decided it was time to clear the way for the Nightmare General. I was also starting to run out of lumber, so I needed to clear out some of the world to get more lumber. And you can move the points that your lumber mill and your berry pickers and all of them will travel to by right-clicking on the building, and then you can place a little flag in case you didn't know how to do that. Periodically, I would also use the marketplace to trade my more plentiful resources for what I needed. In one case, I had just built the Engineer's Guild and needed more gold so I could start building trebuchets. And each trebuchet does take 2 gold to build, which personally I think is a little high. Like, they're pretty powerful, but I think they're not 2 gold powerful in my opinion because it's so expensive to trade for the gold. But next it was Nightmare General time. I pulled him into this little nook with a tower and a gate full of upgraded crossbowmen. As I burned him down, I started building more defenses around the other sides of the base to prepare for that final assault. I trained up more crossbows. They're one of the most effective units in my opinion, that you can really load up a tower with crossbows. They are single target, so they can get big groups of enemies really well, and with the speed research they do quite a lot of damage, and they don't have a lot of the weaknesses of the siege weapons with their minimum range, and they're able to be packed onto the towers so they're not as vulnerable. It's harder to get, like, trebuchets take up an entire massive tower, so it's harder to build towers for them and keep them safe. The night of day 10, I tried to lure the second Nightmare General up to the same choke point as the first one, which did work, but sometimes this doesn't go so well because the Nightmare Generals are faster than non-mounted units, and if they kill a unit and they're not in range of another, or they're not in range of your buildings, they'll just run back to where they started, and then you have to go get them again with a new unit and try to get them home fast enough to lead the Nightmare General all the way back. I was able to get this one, which means that by the time the final assault timer started ticking down, I had 1.5 Nightmare Generals down and just 1 to go. Another pro tip, and this one is a game changer. The challenge objective is to kill the Nightmare Generals. I wasn't totally sure that that was it until I won it. I kind of assumed that I would have to also survive the wave, but you don't. You can defeat the Nightmare Generals probably before the final wave and win it, if you can swing that. And if I had known that when I started, I probably would have approached this very differently. But there's a little tip for you if you really want to go heavy on like an aggressive combat stance, not worry as much about defenses, not worry as much about resources. That's a perfectly viable strategy. But I was preparing for this big wave, so I started setting up my walls. What I usually like to do is the same thing I did with the choke point, but on a larger scale, where I'll do one solid wall around the inside, and then just dot extra walls around the outside to give the enemies something to attack, something to get stuck on before they reach the inner wall. And this gives crossbows and trebuchets a little bit more time to whittle them down before they can start banging on those walls. I did deplete one of my stone mines, which was unfortunate, but I got lucky with this map. There are tons of stone mines. They're all pretty close. And also, once the final wave timer starts ticking down, it says 3 minutes, and it goes by so fast. And this is why I try to start building defenses as early as possible, because building takes a lot more time than I expect. Even with all of the build speed upgrades, it just takes time to build these top tier walls, top tier towers. And I often would underestimate how long it would take and leave myself with a big hole in the wall that I just couldn't get to. Getting the trebuchets up into a massive stone tower does help. If you can swing 1 or 2 of those, it gives them a much better range, and it also helps keep them from getting destroyed once the enemies make it through the walls, which they might. And then day 12, the final wave was on its way. This also brings with it all the enemies on the map, like so many other challenges, and the campaign mode also does. So if you cleared out the area pretty well, you might have some time as they walk in from the edge of the map. But if you have some groups nearby that you didn't clear out, those will be there really fast, almost instantly, so get ready. And some directions have fewer enemies coming in, so I like to pay attention as the fight is going on. If I notice some of my crossbows kill all of their enemies and they're idle, I'll pull them off that tower and move them to another side of the map where they're more useful. And also, knowing what I know now about the objective, if you kill the Nightmare Generals, the game's over. I would actually move all the crossbows straight to the Nightmare General and just let the enemies, wail on the walls and hope I can burn them down fast enough. This would work really well, especially when I have 2 of them down already, which was so good. I cannot recommend enough going out early to bring them down if you have the firepower to do it. I feel like that's really key to winning this challenge. I also didn't use the laser beam spell on this one. I try to get that going because it's good for clearing out the groups of little guys that come in. But a warning, it does not do much to the Nightmare Generals. They just have a ton of health and it's kind of hard to burn them down with the laser. So I think using it on them is a waste unless they have like a sliver of health left and you're really down to the wire. Maybe then I would use it, but in general you want to use the laser beam spell on the groups of little enemies. After a bit, enemies started getting through the walls, but I had the Nightmare General kind of nicely pinned next to this tower, and crossbows were just able to get him down. Even with the reinforced walls though, look how much damage he does. Basically by himself, he's just destroying these really high level stone walls. It's crazy how powerful these guys are, and they have, I think, 6,000 health. I don't have a good gauge for how much damage the archers do, or the crossbows do with each hit, but it's not that much. It's really, really tough to burn these guys down. And if they come with a wave as well, it gets much harder to fight them, because even if you have your dudes target the most dangerous enemy, which there's an option for that, the little guys will help them burn through the walls, and they'll just break through your defenses, knock your towers down, and kill all of your soldiers. But I think I had a combination of just a good, lucky spawn, a lucky run. I didn't encounter any issues where I lost a bunch of soldiers to the enemies on the map. I got the Nightmare Generals kind of stuck in a little spot where I could get them pretty easily, and that was it. And the funny thing is, I knew I had some monsters who breached the walls, so when the game sort of paused and started zooming in, I assumed that I lost again, because it has the same sort of You know, when you lose, it zooms in on your town hall and it like fades to gray and it says defeat. And I thought that was happening, but then it said victory. And I did actually scream when this happened, because I'm not kidding when I say I attempted this level dozens of times over several weeks. It's very hard. And I also thought I needed to survive the final wave, which you don't necessarily need to do. But that's it. That's how I beat the ultra hard mode. Darkness may fall. Diplomacy is not an option. Challenge level. All very wordy things. I have no idea how I'm gonna succinctly name this video, but that's it. I think this is such a good game and I would recommend checking it out. It is in early access. They updated a lot. It's coming along really nicely. I've never really had any like early access jank. It feels pretty polished to me. But this video is already very long, so I'll end it here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if there are any other challenge runs you'd like me to attempt, especially now that there is a sandbox mode where I think I can basically configure the whole world exactly like I want, with all the different settings and enemy strengths and all that. So let me know if there's any cool challenges you want me to try, and don't forget to subscribe to see more videos like this one. I'll be back soon with another video and I hope to see you there. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.